Hello, friends. In this lecture, I will be taking into account the story of Biju, who is a central character in the novel Inheritance of Loss by Kiran Desai, and we will try to understand. We will try to examine his story from diasporic perspective. Here, I would like to emphasize on one fact that, like, I will not be trying uh, to theorize the concept of identity, nostalgia, remembrance, dislocation. In my deliberation, I will try to focus on the various kinds of problem faced by the immigrants labor in the in the first world country. I will be taking into account the that how by facing a different kind of problem in the alien land, uh, a migrant labor decides finally to come back to his home. So this will be the perspective, and this discussion will also include to examine a story from from new colonial angle too. So it's a it is based merely on the transformation of the soul, or it is based merely on the right or wrong decision to live in the host country or to go back to the root country. So the this will be the issues which I will try to take into consideration, and will try to analyze it by contextualizing it in theoretical articulations, and at the same time offering my own perspective too. So we can say that in the novel, uh, the story of Biju is highly uh, resourced by Fanon conceptualization of national consciousness, and to some extent we can include his concept of violence too. So we find that how Biju's journey from Kalimpong to New York and then back Kalimpong is a process of inner transformation, is the process of restoration of the nation to the people, is the process of the creation of the new man, that how he he discovers to find his new identity, how he he discovers to to associate himself to his own nation. His experience as a migrant labor in New York enables him to perceive himself as a part of the large group of lower class immigrants from the third world, as well as to see his connections with economic immigrants in India, such as Nepali. So when he is there in the US, he he finds space, he finds opportunity to connect his uh, individual identity with the collective collective kind of identity, which is one of the very dominant features of diaspora. uh, when we when we think about diaspora in the another country, that how diasporic people, uh, by rituals, by cultures, by similar kind of pattern, try to revive their indigenous identity. So is the case with Biju in the novel, that he he finds his individual identity associated with the identity of lower class immigrants, from the third world, and how he discovers his connection with the economic immigrants in India, such as Nepali, who have, we can say, migrated from Nepal and are living in the different parts of India as immigrants labor, having their own identity as Indian, but even then, facing different kind of uh, racial or territorial prejudices. Actually, this entails a radical change in his attitude towards racial differences, too, that helps him recover from his racist perceptions of the Hapsi, that is, black people. Furthermore, we can see that his revised identity, the kind of identity which Vizu is having after returning to India, is a kind of redefined identity, is a kind of revised identity, is a kind of revisited identity which he has realized after going through certain kind of experience in New York. Furthermore, we can see that his revised identity as an Indian to develop enable him to develop a dissident voice that is critical of economic and political inequalities in the world, forcing the poor citizen of the third world nations to immigrate to the first world countries. Biju comes to the US with a feeling for hatred towards black people, which he learned in India. I quote from the novel: "Once a man from Biju's village, who worked in the city, had said, I quote, 'Be careful of the Hapsi. Ha! In their own country, they live like donkeys in the trees. They come to India and become men.'" From page number 76 in the novel. While waiting, while waiting in the visa application line, he overhears a conversation. Just I want to, remind you a conversation which is there in the novel on the page number 185. He overhears a conversation among some of the applicants trying to make up a reasonable explanation to be allowed for entry to US. He says, I quote, "We will say a Hapsi broke into the shop, killed our sister-in-law, and how we had to go to funeral. It was a fact. known to all mankind. It's black men who do all of this. Yes, yes. Several others in the line agreed. They were then shocked to see the African American lady behind the counter. So, this is the quotation from the text, uh, telling that how his his idea, or how his opinion on the on the on the on the black people, or we can say on the subaltern people, has been formulated in his mind by his own people. The racist we can say that the racist ideologies persist in contemporary uh, India about lighter skin color over darker skin in relation to citizens of India as well as to the foreigners. It has its root in the myth of an Aryan race, which was carried over particularly by the British in the colonial period. Okay, that how the concept of black man, or how the concept of racist was was conceived and was developed in the form of discourse. It has its origin from the Aryan race in the India, which took over, which was took over by the British colonialism. It is also very much visible in Desai's novel that not only in India but the whole third world is infected by the hierarchies which divide the people of color against themselves. Biju come across, for example, from the kitchens where he works, that in Tanzania, I quote from the text, page number 77, in Tanzania, if they could, they would throw them, Indians, out like they did in Uganda. In Madagascar, if they could, they would throw them out. In Nigeria, if they could, they would throw them out. In Fiji, if they could, they would throw them out. In China, they hate them. So this is how the the identity uh, of the Indian has been perceived in the first world uh, countries. This is this is how that colonialism, we can say, colonialism develops certain kind of uh, vocabulary, uh, assisting to or assisting uh, to create conception about Indian in the world. So the feeling of keeping this quotation in the mind, we can say that the feeling of dislike for immigrant workers of color, felt particularly by the lower classes of the host country, hinders workers from identifying the enemy as new colonialism and new liberal capitalism instead. Uh, the I feel that this habit of hate, we can say that this has become a kind of habit. So let me use the word, the habit of hate. This habit of hate towards the people of color has accompanied Biju, and he found that he has a kind of fear for the white people who who had done Indian great harm, and a lack of generosity regarding almost everyone else who had never done a single harmful thing to India. So we can say that this hate between Indians and Africans have has a colonial history. In this context, I would like to quote Bijay Prashad, who says that in the late 17th, about half a million South Asian came to Caribbean and South America to join the recently freed African slaves in a new system of slavery and started to work as indentured laborers. Prasad also brings up the expulsion of Indian immigrants from Kenya and Uganda in the 1917s as another examples of the ways in which this mutual hate was manufactured between Asians and Africans, and how it is crucial to the felicitations of new colonialism or new liberalism. 2. Yet Biju gains a generosity, we find that Biju gains a generosity towards his fellow third world workers, which dismantles the racist hierarchies in his mind. His best friend turns out to be, can you remember the name? Saeed, a black and Muslim man from Zanzibar. I quote from the text. This is a long quote. Biju considers his previous fight with a Pakistani, the usual attack on the man's religion, that he would grown up uttering pigs, pigs, son of pigs. Now here was Saeed, and Biju's admiration of for the man confounded him. Fate worked his way. Biju was overcome by the desire to be his friend. Saeed was kind and he was not Paki. Therefore, he was okay. Therefore, he liked Muslims and hated only Pakis. Therefore, he liked Saeed but hated the general lot of Muslims. Therefore, he liked Muslims and Pakis, and India should see it was all wrong and hand over Kashmir. No, no, how could that be? Therefore, he hated all black people but liked Said. Therefore, there was nothing wrong with black people and Said, or Mexicans, Chinese, Japanese, or anyone else. I quote from page number 76 from the text. Working as a immigrant's labor in New York, Biju loses the this is very important. Biju loses the ground under his Hindu and Indian identities, which have been founded till then on his hatred from Muslim in general and Pakistani in particular, as well as on his racist attitude towards non-white people. These identities instead began to be informed by his awareness of the connections between third world people who are forced to labor abroad, including Nepalese immigrants in his hometown Darjeeling. Hearing from Mr. Ap- Ape, the Hindu news agent in New York, about the Nepali insurgency in India, Biju challenges his xenophobic attitude to immigrants in India. I quote from the text. They should kick, I quote from the text, they should kick the bastards to Nepal. Continued, Bangladeshis to Bangladesh, Afghans to Afghanistan, all Muslims to Pakistan, Tibetans, Bhutanese. Why are they sitting in our country? Why are we sitting here? The country is different, he said without saying. Without us, what would they do? I quote from page number 228 in the text. Biju is Biju is able to see, a certain kind of similarity between the immigrants of Darjeeling and New York in terms of forces. I would repeat this statement. Biju is able to see certain kind of similarity between immigrants in Darjeeling and New York in terms of forces pushing them for migration as well as their contributions to the capitalist world economy, because he now considers himself a member of large army of chief immigrants laborers. His national identity, liberated from feeling of hatred, particularly towards peoples resembling him in terms of their underprivileged positioning in the world, does not block from sight anymore the commonalities between them. On the contrary, it evolves into a kind of political and social consciousness. This, his feeling that how he can connect himself with the immigrants' labor, resembling or equating it with the laborers working in Darjeeling, Kalimpong, or in New York or Bihar, or in any part of the actually world. So, on the contrary, it involves into a political and social consciousness, as imagined by Fanon, Mr. Fanon, for the true meaning of decolonization. So, his realization, his social awareness, is enabling him to to free his mind from system of colonial system. This system may be of different kind. So I'll repeat this line. On the contrary, it evolves into a political and social consciousness as imagined by Fanon, uh, through which he can gain an insight into the fracture, stratification, and the bloody tensions fed by class, and recover from the racial hatred. This is what Fanon, if we take into account the Fanon's conceptualization of the process of decolonization, we find that Biju's volcanic explosion to Harish or Harry preceding his decision to return to India, you know, attends the challenge in his perception of we, shaped by his newly formed class based and race based identity. I quote from the text: without us living like pigs, said Biju, what business would you have? This is how you make your money, paying us nothing, because we can't do anything. This is from page number 188 from the novel The Inheritance of Loss. Having now, I am coming to his process of transformation and his his process of that how he enabled himself to develop national consciousness in himself, and how did he take decision to come back to his homeland. Having spent 3 years in New York, Biju decides to return to India despite all the poverty that earlier forced him to leave, mainly because he can no longer tolerate loneliness, isolation, a feeling that seems to be shared by the members of what the narrator calls the shadow class. I quote from the text: "You live you live intensely with others, only to have them disappear overnight. Since the shadow class was condemned to movement, the man left for other jobs, towns, got deported, returned home, changed names. Sometimes someone came popping around a corner again, or on the subway, then they vanished again. Addresses, phone numbers did not hold." From page number 102. So we can say that immigrants, workers, particularly those who are illegal, are a shadow classes, in the sense that they can't settle down to lead a substantial life. Also, since they are condemned to movement, it is much harder for the immigrant laborers to inculcate class solidarity. Biju returns to India, his, his father, simply because he values being with him in Kalimpong, then having a job in New York. In an interview, I quote from an interview, in an interview with uh, Eleanor Wachel, Desai says that, I quote, "Viju makes an emotional decision over the economic decision and returns to India realizing, I think, that he needs his father more than anything else. And he needs his family more than anything else. And his father needs his son more than anything else." As narrator says, year by year, his life was not amounting to anything at all. In a space that should have included family, friends, he was the only one displacing the air. Biju thinks himself on his way to a travel agency to buy a plane ticket to India. It appears, this is very important, it appears that narrator finds a meaning in Biju's return to India, which is, though not idealized at all, on the contrary, it can be interpreted that Desai's participation in understanding of national consciousness. The novel places emphasis on the true on the true true meaning of national consciousness and about Viju's embrace of his national identity or father. Before selling him a ticket, Mr. Kakkar warns Biju. But Biju said, "I have to go." He says that I have to go. My father is there. He is alone. It seems that his entire being, his father's entire being, this is, I am saying from my perspective, his entire being is calling him. His root is calling him. His memory is telling him to go back. Ah, soft feelings, they will get you nowhere. The minute you arrive, Viju, you will start to think of how to get the bloody hell out. Just as the salesman anticipates, Biju runs into series Biju runs into serious problems as soon as he arrives in Kalimpong. The gifts, the presents he has bought for his father, and all savings he had hidden in his socks, socks, socks and underwear, and all his clothes are captured by Gorkha National Liberation Front's boy who give him a lift to Kalimpong. I quote, darkness fell and he sat right in the middle of the path, without his baggage, without his savings, the worst of all, without his pride, back from America with far less than he would ever had. Biju goes through what is foreseen by Mr. Kakkar, yet this does not mean that narrator agrees with the later on his privileging of economics needs over emotional ones. Rather, what happens to him in Kalimpong immediately after his arrival seems to foreground the fact that Biju's life in his hometown will be at least as hard as his life in New York in terms of material difficulties, which does not correspond at all to the ways in which he imagines his homeland as a migrant in New York. One night, Biju, I quote from the text from page number 102, thoughts of his village where he had lived with his grandmother. The village was buried in silver grasses that were taller than a man and made a sound, shoo, 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 shoo. I quote from the text, as the wind turned them this way and that. Despite how Biju feels upon being robbed, the novel does not seem to suggest that he is back from America with far less than he would ever had. The inheritance of loss concludes with the happy scene of reunion between the cook and his son Biju. In other words, manages to keep manages to keep affection, love,